Isabella never imagined that choosing true love would cost so much, but when the press flashes captured the moment she rejected 5 millionaires to be with the gardener, she knew she'd crossed a line of no return. The grand hall of the Monteverde mansion shimmered under check crystal chandeliers, each piece worth more than a house. Guests circulated with flutes of Dom Perignon champagne, their conversations echoing in low, calculated tones. Augustus Monteverde, at 58, surveyed it all from the top of the Carrara marble staircase, his impeccable tuxedo contrasting with the tight smile that barely concealed his anxiety. This night would define the future of his only daughter and consequently the fate of his empire. "Gentlemen," he announced, in the deep voice that had commanded boardrooms for decades, "thank you for your presence on this very special occasion." His eyes swept across the 5 men lined up like chess pieces: Edward Vance, heir to a banking dynasty; Richard Montgomery, oil magnate; Philip Andrews, young tech prodigy; Charles Mendez, a Portuguese aristocrat with vineyards in 3 countries, and Alexander Ferris, an investor who transformed failing companies into lucrative empires. Isabella stood at the top of the staircase, a navy blue silk gown hugging her delicate figure. At 21, she possessed the serene beauty of her deceased mother, but her brown eyes held a depth few could decipher. She descended the steps with the elegance of someone born into that world, but each step brought her closer to a choice she repudiated with every fiber of her being. "My dear," Augustus extended his hand as she approached, "our guests are eager to get to know you better." Edward was the first to approach, his practiced business smile already rehearsed in dozens of negotiations. "Isabella, it's a pleasure to finally speak with you. Your father told me about your studies in literature. I must say, I have a private library with over 10,000 volumes, many first editions." "How interesting," she replied, practiced politeness masking her discomfort. "And do you read them?" The question caught him off guard. "Well, they're primarily investments. Rare books tend to appreciate significantly in value." Isabella nodded, but her gaze had already drifted to the glass doors leading to the gardens. Outside, she could see Miguel's silhouette bent over a rosebed, his hands working with the delicacy of an artisan. Even from a distance, there was something about his movements that conveyed a peace she had never found within those gilded walls. "Isabella," Richard's voice brought her back. "I was asking if you'd be interested in traveling to my oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. It's a unique experience seeing the ocean from that perspective." "I imagine so," she murmured, but her thoughts were on the gardens where Miguel had nursed a nearly dead rosebush back to health 6 months ago. Day after day, she'd watched him from her bedroom window, watering, pruning, and talking to the plant as if it could understand him. Now, the rosebush displayed buds promising extraordinary blooms. Philip, the youngest of the group at 28, tried a different approach. "I hear you play the piano. I have a startup developing AI-powered musical instruments. We could create compositions together, using algorithms to—" "Excuse me," Isabella interrupted softly, "I need some air." Before anyone could protest, she slipped through the glass doors, leaving behind the murmur of forced conversations and the weight of calculating gazes. The night garden welcomed her with the scent of jasmine and the gentle murmur of the stone fountain. Miguel knelt beside the rosebush she had observed so many times, his hands gently adjusting the support of a new stem. "She'll bloom soon," he said without looking up, as if he knew Isabella was there. "How do you know?" she asked, approaching him. Miguel looked up, and Isabella felt something different when she met those brown eyes. There was no calculation, no interest beyond the present moment. "Because she tells me, plants talk, if you know how to listen." "What's this one saying?" "That she's grateful that someone believed in her when everyone thought she was a lost cause." He stood up, wiping his hands on his leather apron. "Sometimes, we just need someone who sees our true nature, not what we appear to be." The words touched something deep within Isabella. She remembered her mother, Clara Monteverde, a woman who had cultivated a small garden at the back of the property before her illness. Clara used to say that flowers taught patience. They bloomed in their own time, not when we wished them to. "My mother loved gardening," Isabella murmured, surprised to share something so intimate with someone she knew only through furtive observations. "I know. She planted this rose bush 5 years ago." Isabella felt the air leave her lungs. How do you know that?" Mrs. Monteverde taught me everything about this garden before. Miguel hesitated, respectful. She said that one day someone would need to take care of the things she loved. Isabella's eyes filled with unshed tears. For the past 3 years, since her mother's death, she'd felt disconnected from everything that had once brought her joy. Her father, consumed by grief and business, had become distant and controlling. Her high society friends offered superficial sympathy, but here, in this garden her mother had loved, she finally found an echo of something real. She also talked about you, Miguel continued, his voice as gentle as the wind among the leaves. She said she had a brilliant daughter who would one day find her own path to bloom. I don't feel brilliant. In fact, I feel, she searched for the right words, like that rosebush before you took care of it. Miguel smiled, and it was as if the entire garden lit up. Then maybe you just need time and the right kind of care. Inside, through the glass doors, Isabella could see the 5 suitors chatting with her father. Augustus was gesturing animatedly, probably explaining his qualifications as if they were commodities on the stock market. The scene made her nauseous. Why do you do it? She asked, watching Miguel return to his work. What? Take care of things others would discard. Miguel paused, considering the question. Because every living thing deserves a chance to show its true nature. And because, he looked directly at her, sometimes the most beautiful things arise where we least expect them. At that moment, something broke inside Isabella. It wasn't sudden passion or teenage rebellion, it was recognition, as if after years of navigating murky waters, she had finally found solid ground. Isabella, Augustus's stern voice cut through the night air. What are you doing out here? Our guests are waiting. She turned to see her father at the garden entrance, his face a mask of controlled irritation. Behind him, the 5 suitors watched the scene with barely concealed curiosity. I was just, she began, but Miguel stepped forward. Miss Isabella was asking about her mother's garden, Mr. Monteverde. I was explaining about the rose bushes. Augustus looked at Miguel as if he were seeing an undesirable insect. Thank you, Miguel. You may leave now. Actually, Dad, he was telling me important things about Mom. The ensuing silence was thick with tension. Augustus took a deep breath, clearly struggling to maintain his composure in front of the guests. We can discuss this later, darling. Now please return to the ballroom. Isabella glanced one last time at Miguel, who nodded almost imperceptibly, a silent encouragement to do what her heart dictated. She walked back to the ballroom, but something had changed in her steps. She was no longer the obedient daughter being led to the altar of convenience. The next 2 hours dragged on like an eternity. Edward expounded on his real estate investments in Manhattan. Richard talked about his properties in Tuscany. Philip demonstrated an app that would revolutionize human communication. Charles recited his family's genealogy, tracing back to the 15th century. Alexander presented charts of his latest business successes. Throughout it all, Isabella smiled and nodded at appropriate moments, but her mind was in the gardens. She remembered afternoons watching Miguel work, noticing how he treated each plant individually, recognizing its specific needs. There was a philosophy in his dedication that transcended work. It was a form of practical, patient, and transformative love. Well, Augustus announced when the clock struck midnight, the moment of decision has arrived. The guests lined up again, this time with the barely concealed anxiety of those awaiting a verdict. The press, strategically positioned to capture the historic moment, adjusted their cameras. Isabella, Augustus's voice echoed through the ballroom. It's time to choose your future. She remained motionless for a moment, feeling the weight of dozens of gazes upon her. She could feel the expectations, the plans already laid out, the prenuptial agreements that would be signed before dawn. But she could also feel something else, the rose bush in the garden, about to bloom after months of patient care. I've made my choice, she said, her voice clear and firm. The 5 men straightened, each convinced he was the chosen one. The cameras zoomed in, ready to capture the historic moment. But my choice isn't in this room. A murmur ran through the guests. Augustus frowned, not immediately understanding. Isabella walked to the garden doors and opened them. "Miguel, could you come here please?" The silence was deafening. Miguel appeared in the doorway, still wearing his leather apron, his hands clean but bearing the marks of honest labor. He looked at the multitude of shocked faces, but showed no intimidation, only the quiet dignity of someone who knows his own worth. "Isabella, what do you think you're doing?" Augustus's voice came out strangled. "I'm choosing someone who knows how to nurture life with patience and love," she replied, extending her hand to Miguel. "Someone who sees beauty where others see only waste. Someone who honored my mother's memory when we all forgot her." Miguel hesitated only a second before taking her hand. It was calloused, strong, and conveyed a security she had never felt in the handshakes of businessmen. "This is absurd," exploded Edward. "Augustus, you can't allow this farce." "A very bad joke," muttered Richard, his face red with indignation. But it was Charles, the aristocrat, who verbalized what everyone was thinking. "You're throwing away an empire for a gardener." Isabella turned to face them, and at that moment, something awakened within her. Not anger, but a crystalline clarity that surprised her. "You speak of an empire," she said, her voice cutting through the murmur like a sharp blade. "But what kind of empire is built on lies, on transactions where people become commodities? My mother taught me that true value isn't measured in bank digits, but in the ability to grow something beautiful in barren land." She pointed to the garden through the open doors. "You saw only an employee. I see a man who dedicated years of his life preserving something my mother loved. When we all lost ourselves in grief, he continued to honor her memory, one rose at a time." The cameras captured every word, every expression. Isabella knew that those images would travel the entire country before dawn, but she no longer cared. "Miguel," she continued, turning to him, "you taught me that some things need time to bloom, that patience isn't passivity, but an active form of love, that seeing potential where others see only problems is a rare gift." Miguel clasped her hand, and when he spoke, his voice filled every corner of the ballroom. "Isabella, I can't offer private jets or mansions in Monaco, but I can promise to care for you as I care for this garden, with daily devotion, with respect for who you truly are, and with faith that our love can create something beautiful and lasting." And dear viewers, if you're following this story and feel, as I do, that there's something magical when two people connect this authentically, when true love transcends all social conventions, then you'll want to follow every detail of what happens next. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because Isabella and Miguel's journey is just beginning, and the upcoming twists will touch your heart in ways you can't imagine. True love always finds a way, but that way is full of challenges you have to see to believe. The ballroom erupted in indignant voices. Philip gesticulated furiously, speaking of social degradation. Alexander muttered about financial consequences, but it was Augustus who silenced everyone with a shout that echoed through the walls. "Enough!" He approached Isabella and Miguel, his face contorted by a mixture of pain and fury that went far beyond the present situation. "You have no idea what you're doing, Isabella, what you're destroying." "I'm saving myself, father." "Saving yourself?" Augustus laughed, but it was a bitter sound, devoid of mirth. "You're throwing away everything I've worked for my entire life." It was then that Miguel spoke, surprising everyone. "Mr. Monteverde, with all due respect, perhaps the problem isn't what Miss Isabella is choosing, but what you're trying to avoid." Augustus turned to him like a predator. "How dare you?" "Because I overheard your conversations with Mrs. Monteverde in the garden," Miguel replied calmly. "Before she fell ill, she said you were afraid that Isabella would make the same choices you did when you were young." The silence that followed was absolute. Augustus paled as if he had seen a ghost. "What choices?" Isabella asked, but something in her tone indicated that she already suspected the answer. Miguel looked at Augustus, offering him the chance to speak first. When the older man remained silent, he continued, "Your father and mother married for love, Miss Isabella, against the wishes of both their families. Mrs. Monteverde came from a humble family, the daughter of a carpenter." The guests murmured, Shocked, Isabella felt the world spin around her. That's true, she asked her father. Augustus closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there were tears there. Clara was the daughter of the man who renovated my parents' house. I was 22, she was 19. My father disowned me when we announced our engagement, but you built your empire. Yes, I built it, to prove that her love was worth any sacrifice, to show the world that a carpenter's daughter could be the wife of one of the richest men in the country. His voice cracked, and when she died, when I lost her, I started to think that maybe my father was right, that all the suffering, all the struggle wasn't worth it if I was going to be alone in the end. Isabella approached her father, tears streaming down her face. Father, I wanted to protect you from that, Isabella. I wanted to ensure that you would never go through what I went through, that you would never need to prove your worth to anyone. But in doing so, Miguel said gently, you were denying her the same right you claimed, the right to choose true love. Augustus looked at the gardener, and for the first time, he didn't see an employee, but a man who understood something fundamental about life. Clara liked you, he murmured. She said you had the soul of an artist, and she was right about many things. Miguel smiled sadly, including about Miss Isabella. Mrs. Monteverde knew she would be strong enough to make her own choices. Isabella looked around the ballroom, at the indignant suitors, at the journalists capturing every moment, at the father who was finally showing his vulnerability, and then she looked at Miguel, who remained by her side without demanding anything but acceptance for who he was. Father, she said, her voice firm but tender, I understand your fear, but I can't live my life trying to avoid the pain you felt. Mother wouldn't have wanted that. Charles, who had remained silent during the revelation, stepped forward. Augustus, are you really going to allow this? Are you going to let your daughter ruin your reputation for a whim? Augustus looked at the aristocrat, then at the other suitors, and finally at his daughter. For a moment, Isabella feared that he would still try to prevent her choice, but then something changed in his gaze, as if an old fog finally dissipated. My reputation, he said slowly, was built on the love of a woman who faced the world for me. If my daughter has found someone willing to do the same for her, then perhaps, he paused, took a deep breath, perhaps Clara is watching us and smiling. Edward, red with indignation, pointed a finger at Augustus. You've lost your mind. This will cost you, Monteverde, a great deal. Threats. A new voice asked from the entrance to the ballroom. Everyone turned to see a stylish middle-aged woman, wearing an impeccable pantsuit. It was Marina Santos, the country's most feared lawyer, known for destroying powerful men in court. Marina, Augustus seemed surprised. What are you doing here? Clara asked me to come. Should something like this happen, she replied calmly. She made some arrangements before she died, Augustus, arrangements that ensure Isabella has complete autonomy over her decisions, including marriage. Marina opened a briefcase she was carrying. Gentlemen, she addressed the suitors, I imagine some of you are considering financial reprisals against the Monteverde family. I must inform you that Clara Monteverde, anticipating this exact situation, established a trust fund that protects all family assets from any blackmail or external pressure. Silence fell. Marina continued. Furthermore, she extensively documented the questionable practices of some present in this room. I have in my possession information regarding tax evasion, market manipulation, and other irregularities that I'm sure you would prefer to keep private. Philip attempted a strained laugh. You're bluffing. Marina smiled, but it was a blood-chilling smile. Mr. Andrews, would you prefer I publicly mention your algorithms for manipulating personal data, or would you rather keep our conversation civil? One by one, the suitors realized the evening had taken a completely different turn than planned. They were no longer the ones in control. How did Clara know? Augustus asked, his voice filled with posthumous admiration for his wife. Because she knew you better than anyone. Marina smiled softly. She knew that pain would make you make decisions based on fear, not love, and she knew Isabella needed protection to make her own choices. Isabella felt a wave of gratitude, and longing so intense it nearly overwhelmed her. Even in death, her mother continued to care for her, ensuring she had the freedom to choose her own path. "There's one more thing," Marina continued, taking a sealed envelope from the briefcase, a letter from Clara to Isabella, to be opened only when she found true love. With trembling hands, Isabella opened the envelope. Her mother's familiar handwriting danced before her eyes. "My dearest daughter, if you are reading this letter, it means your heart has found its home. It doesn't matter if he is rich or poor, noble or common. What matters is that he sees your soul and loves it completely. Your father will try to protect you from pain. But remember, a life without risk is a life without growth. The most beautiful flowers bloom from the most unlikely soil. Trust your heart, my daughter. It knows the way. With all my love, Mother." Isabella clutched the letter to her chest, feeling as if her mother were there, blessing her choice. Miguel approached her. "May I?" he asked, indicating the letter. She handed it to him, watching him read silently. When he finished, there were tears in his eyes. "She truly was special," he murmured. "And she would have loved you," Isabella replied with certainty. The suitors, realizing the evening was definitively lost to them, began to withdraw one by one. Edward muttered something about hasty decisions. Richard spoke of reconsidering partnerships. Philip simply left in silence. Charles, surprisingly, approached Isabella before departing. "I may not agree with your choice," he said, "but I admire your courage. Few have the strength to follow their heart when the whole world is watching." Alexander was the last to leave, but not before whispering to Augustus, "This isn't over, Monteverde." Marina intercepted him at the door. "Mr. Ferris, a word." Her sweet voice carried an unmistakable threat. When they were finally alone, Isabella, Miguel, Augustus, and Marina, the silence was filled with possibilities. "And now?" Augustus asked, seeming younger and more vulnerable than Isabella had seen him in years. "Now," said Marina, putting away her papers, "you build a new story." Clara left specific instructions about that as well. She smiled. "She wanted you to know that true love always finds a way, but that way becomes easier when we have people who believe in us." Marina started to leave, but paused. "Oh, Miguel." "Yes, ma'am. Clara left something for you too." She handed him a small wooden box. "She said you would know what to do with it." Miguel carefully opened the box. Inside were seeds, dozens of them, each in a small envelope with the name of a different flower. "They're seeds of her favorite flowers," Marina explained. "She wanted you to plant a new garden when the time was right." Miguel looked at Isabella, then at Augustus. "With your permission, sir, I would like to plant these seeds in the garden, so that Mrs. Monteverde continues to be a part of the family." Augustus nodded, his voice choked with emotion. "I would like that." In the months that followed, the story of Isabella and Miguel became legend, not for the scandalous choice of an heiress, but for the courage to follow their hearts against all expectations. The garden bloomed as never before, each bed a symphony of colors reflecting the couple's patient and constant love. Augustus, initially apprehensive, gradually recognized in Miguel qualities he himself had lost over the years: the ability to find joy in simple things, the patience to cultivate something beautiful, the quiet strength that didn't need to prove itself through ostentation. The wedding took place in the garden, among the rose bushes Clara had planted and Miguel had saved. It was a simple ceremony, but full of meaning, each detail chosen by love, not appearance. During the ceremony, when the pastor asked if there were any objections, a reverent silence fell over the garden, and then, as if nature itself approved the union, a gentle breeze made the rose petals dance around the couple, a final gift from Clara to her daughter. Years later, when Isabella looked at the garden she and Miguel had expanded together, she saw not just flowers, but living proof that true love can indeed bloom in any soil, as long as it finds the right conditions, patience, dedication, and the courage to believe that some things are worth more than gold. Miguel was right. Plants truly do speak, if you know how to listen. and what they told Isabella was simple, but revolutionary. Sometimes, the deepest roots grow in the humblest soil, and the most beautiful flowers bloom when we least expect them. Augustus's empire continued to thrive, but now it was guided by different principles, not just profit, but the positive impact a company can have on people's lives. Miguel, with his natural wisdom and unwavering ethics, brought a fresh perspective to the family business, and at the heart of it all, like a beacon of hope for those who still doubted the power of true love, was the garden, growing, flourishing, proving day after day that lasting beauty is born when we dare to plant seeds of hope in ground others would deem impossible. The last thing Clara had told Marina, before she died, was that true love is like a garden. It needs time, care, and faith to flourish, but when it finally blooms, its beauty can transform the entire world around it. Isabella and Miguel proved their mother right, and every time someone doubted the power of love over social conventions, all one had to do was look at that flourishing garden, to understand that some things are stronger than any opposition, because they are fueled by the most powerful force in the universe, a heart that chooses to love, despite everything. And so, among petals and promises, among deep roots and dreams stretching towards the sun, the story of Isabella and Miguel continued to grow, living proof that true love not only finds a way, but creates entire gardens, where there was once only barren land.